This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review with Gilad Halpern.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review, a program dedicated to the word, to the thought and to debate, brought to you by the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute, which promotes humanistic, democratic and liberal values in the social discourse in Israel. I'm your host, Gilad Halpern, and today's interview is being recorded on the premises of the 2016 conference of the Association for Israel Studies here in Jerusalem. My guest today is a demographer at Trinity College in Connecticut, who is currently researching the role of grandparents in shaping college students' reaction to the Israel debate on campuses. Dr. Ariela Keysar, hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Hello from Jerusalem.
So the increasingly intense debate on Israel on college campuses often catches young Jewish students off guard. They feel a natural attachment to Israel by virtue of having grown up Jewish, but also feel less and less comfortable with that attachment. Is that when they turn to their grandparents to help resolve that confusion?
Well, let's start and understand the campus climate. Today, on American campuses, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a litmus test for support of global struggles for social justice and human rights. And Jewish college students are uncomfortably forced to take a position about the conflict, whether they are ready for it or not.
Yeah, a clear-cut position.
Yes, they have to. They have to say, I support, I don't support. They really have to state their opinions. And what happens for many of them, they're simply illiterate, if we kind of label them, when it comes to historic events, when it comes to Jewish geopolitics. Now, let's kind of remember, and it's very, very much covered in the Israeli news. In the United States, we're now in election season. And American Jews, young and old, are confronted with this dual loyalty dilemma. When they come to think about their candidate and who they're supporting, who they're going to vote for, what are they voting as, Americans or as Jews? And as you said, overall, young American Jews are attached to Israel. About half say that they're very attached to Israel. But when we come and talk to them specifically and ask them if they support Israel regardless of how government behaves, they're split. And the constant rhetoric battles on U.S. campuses lead to what the Jewish students described as there is no room for Zionism on campus. So they feel obliged to kind of keep their thoughts and positions, even if they like Israel, if they're very, very positive, they grew up with kind of notions of the Jewish homeland, they have to suppress and be quiet on campus. One student even told me, yes, it's true that was going to a very liberal college in the United States. The student says, if you express pro-Israel view, people label you as racist, as an oppressor. So think about it. You are with your peers, you're with your friends. Do you want to be labeled as somebody who's racist?
But the problem is, because they are illiterate, as you put it, they are really at a disadvantage when it comes to asserting their Zionism.
Absolutely. And even something else that we here in Israel have to remember. Americans go to college at a young age compared to Israelis. Some of them are not even 18 when they separate from their home, their very, very, very warm environment, and they have to live on their own. They have to fend for themselves, away from the synagogue, away from the family, far away, and they are simply not ready. Some of them are still searching for their own Jewish identity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when it comes to the family background, which is really the focus of your research, how does it feed into this situation?
So I'm looking for some, what I call untapped Jewish resources to help prepare these young Jews. So I'm looking at grandparents as Jewish socialization agents, and I argue that they are under-researched and underutilized. Mm-hmm. We talk about the role of the Jewish schools. We talk about the roles of parents. We talked about the Jewish education and the peers. But our study, we did a study of bar bat mitzvah American and Canadians, and we found out that grandparents are, in fact, important Jewish role models. Today, people live longer. They have healthier lives. And they have the one commodity that we all feel that is needed in our life. They have time. So they can share their Jewish history, the family memories with the young generation. The parents don't have time for that. Parents have to discipline their kids. They care about the daily activities. Grandparents have these kind of awareness and the time to kind of transmit the values.
But there is a generational difference here. I mean, we're talking about decades between these people in terms of generation. There's really a great difference in this sense, isn't there?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's something that our researchers are looking at and talking about the distancing from Israel. So if we compare the different generations, if you look at young people versus older generations, the young generation are by far less attached, let's say, to Israel compared to the older generation. But in our research on young people, we find that young people in general are distancing. So let me explain. We are, with my colleague, Barry Cosman, we conduct studies on American religion. And we find that Americans in general are distancing from religion. The young people are the leaders, like what I call the harbingers. They're more likely to reject religious institutions. But then when we call them the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, these nuns are also politically independent. Now, if we talk about what you see in the election season, there are more and more young people that consider themselves independent politically. These people, not only that they distance from religion and politics, but here the case of distancing from Israel.
Right. No, so what I'm saying is because they're the socialization process of the grandparents was so different. I'm assuming that for most of them it was in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, and maybe during the 50s and 60s. What lessons can they draw from it? Or is it, I don't know, just some kind of a functional position or role that the grandparents take by virtue of just, as you said, being there?
Okay, so what we're looking at, so I'm a demographer, so I like to look at data, and I like to show what we call the evidence-based on the research. So not only kind of to put it in theoretical framework, but rather bringing some findings, some statistical findings to illustrate the claims that we make. So I'm using data from our recent national study or survey of American Jewish college students. We interviewed close to 1,200 students in 55 colleges all around the United States. And when we asked them to tell us what are the crucial issues facing Jewish students today, Israel came up as a top concern. Now,
do you think it's because they feel under constant attack?
Well, it is very, very much an issue. That's Israel is constantly in the news, and not only they hear it from social media, etc., but that's definitely the environment on campus. Now, being aware, or actually wanted to, as a research question, to look at the role of the grandparents, we asked the Jewish college students about the involvement of their grandparents during their adolescence in middle school, which is a very, very important stage, with kind of developing their
formative stage in their adolescence.
Development, yes, absolutely. So what we found out that there are several kind of activities that the students had with their grandparents. So first, and you're not surprised about that, a majority celebrated Jewish holidays with their grandparents, but about a fifth celebrated non-religious holidays with the grandparents. How come? We know, and that kind of about half of the population now, the Jewish population in the United States, is intermarried. So our students, reflecting these trends in the Jewish community, a third of our Jewish college students have non-Jewish grandparents. So a third of them grew up in intermarried families.
So what I'm interested in knowing now is whether it really does anything to solve the illiteracy problem, as you put it. Because this is all very nice. It's, a family event, a bit of, folklore, but it doesn't really provide them with the answers that they need in order to deal with that very problematic situation on campuses.
So now, when we try to relate that, to kind of relate their shared experiences with the grandparents, with their current, as emerging adults, as we call them, during college, their kind of attachments to Israel. And when we looked at the different factors that help influence, if you may, their kind of stronger attachment to Israel, we found out that there are several aspects. First of all, exposure to Israel. So those who came, who were on trips to Israel. But not only Taglit, but we found out that the family trip to Israel is very, very important. Clearly growing up in all Jewish families, but in kind of connection to the role of the grandparents, what we found that those students, that their grandparents were involved with them in cultural Jewish activities, namely visiting Jewish museums. And there are other culture Jewish activities. For example, there are Jewish film festivals, there are Jewish book fairs. So those who were exposed to cultural Judaism, not only the religious aspect, exhibited stronger attachment to Israel.
Right. But that's also interesting in and of itself, because if you take a famous example, Bernie Sanders, I don't know what he does with his grandchildren and whether they're in college yet, but even if they do Jewish things together, he's not really the standard bearer of an attachment to Israel in the sense that most American Jews perceive that, is he?
Absolutely. So he's, for many people in the Jewish community, he's definitely not a Jewish role model. But I think that the young people's support of Bernie resembles what I call the grandpa effect. Today, young people are much more attached, much more have the opportunities to be with their grandparents. They have many, many shared experience. For example, especially in the Jewish community, grandparents are more likely to be college graduates by far. So if you think about the generations differences, this is not compared to my grandparents' experiences.
And a lot fewer of them are immigrants, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, although, most of the American Jews and definitely these college students were born in the United States as well as their parents. But they have much more shared experience with their grandparents. They speak common language. Yeah. So there's less distancing with their grandparents. And I feel that this is, although it's unutilized, unresearched populations, the grandparents' role, I think we have to pay more attention to them and to see what roles they play in transmitting values to their grandchildren.
Yeah. All right, this is really very interesting and innovative in many ways, and I'm sure that there'll be a lot more to say about it as your research progresses. But we'll leave it there. Dr. Ariela Keysar, demographer at Trinity College in Connecticut. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Toda rabba.
And also big thanks to Alex Benish, our sound engineer, and to the Van Leer Institute for their generous support. If you liked this podcast, there are many more where it came from. Just go to www.tlv1.fm/podcasts and take your pick.
Show your face, it's time to leave. Say goodbye. You won't miss it at all. You won't want to come back.